What's up, everybody, and welcome to college football. Finally, we're back. 2023, man. It feels like forever. We've waited a long time for this. We've grinded out months and months of the summertime and baseball and MMA and whatever else you can find a way to get your hands on to occupy your time. And we're here. Week 0, man. Like, I don't love week 0, but it's better than nothing. So, new cast of characters this year. If you haven't heard, changing a few things up at RG. So this particular show this year, you're looking at the 3 main components of it. We'll mix and match every week, but it will be 2 of the 3 of us every single week. Most weeks you'll get all 3 of us. Kyle Murray, you know him. He's our He's working on our projections this year. Kyle, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah, like you said, week 0 is here, and it's more like an appetizer, I guess. Not our favorite thing, but we have it, and we've been waiting a while for it. And I'm looking forward to talking about it with you guys.
Yep. The other familiar face, you've seen him on some other shows, but he's going to be joining the Thursday show this year. Micah Bedard. How you doing, Micah?
Good. Yeah. Happy to, like you said, July, August is like the worst sports period of the year until you get to the end of August. So good to get rewarded with college football. So yeah, week 0 is finally here, ready to get to it.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do. Same format as we always have, game by game. We'll talk you through some of our favorite plays in each game, and we'll rifle through it and give you something to listen to on a Friday. We'll usually have this thing out by Thursday night. So if you're a night owl, you'll be able to get to it. If not, you'll have all day Friday leading up into the Saturday show and extract from it whatever you can. We'll crank it off here. We're going to be mainly dealing with DraftKings on the show because FanDuel's a little bit, and most of these games overlap anyway. So we're all right. Maybe at the end we'll talk a little FanDuel, but we're going to mainly DraftKings here. So I got the lineup HQ fired up, DraftKings. UMass, New Mexico State, first game on the board. We got at the spread right now 7. New Mexico State's -7, 44.5. This thing opened New Mexico State -8.5. I'm a little worried about that. I kind of liked New Mexico State here, but spread's dropping for UMass. I understand why they're going to be a much improved team. I'm going to start off with Kyle here on this particular game. There's some guys in this game I'm very interested in, and I want to hear your take on this game.
Yeah, I mean, this is a typical week 0 game, I suppose. We're getting excited about New Mexico State and UMass, or I guess excited is a happy word to put behind it. But yeah, a couple interesting pieces in this one. Quarterbacks in this one can be interesting depending on the site. I know we're going to mainly talk DraftKings, but I figured it's worth mentioning Diego Pavia is a little bit underpriced on FanDuel. Prefer him over there, but 2 rushing quarterbacks in this game. I think you can make a case for both of them, believe it or not. At 4,800, Tyson, I'm not going to mess with the pronunciation of the last name there, but Russian quarterback transfer over from Clemson and Georgia Tech. I don't mind it if you wanted to, mess around with, in a 150 set, a $4,800 quarterback on DraftKings. I'll have a little bit of him in my 150 build, but other than that, it's nothing that you're going crazy about. But this is a game I'm not expecting to see a whole lot of great football being played, but both quarterbacks having that rushing upside puts that in play based on their price. And like I mentioned, I do prefer Diego Pavia over on FanDuel, but more than in play on DraftKings as well.
Michael, what's your take on this game? I want to also say that I don't know if you guys, anybody out there watching, I think the show this week is free, so you're not behind the paywall yet. And when we get behind the paywall, you won't have access to a lot of this stuff. But we got a lot of good stuff coming out for college football this year. And I know that the expert survey is live now, and we can go into just real quick. I know I want to run down the trend. I had this one identified because I remember watching him last year at the end of the year, Pavia, right? Like, as you can see, this was my useful trend write-up. Like, after the bye week last year, he missed a week, sat out a week. Then they had a bye week, so he had 2 weeks rest. He came back. He was one of the better quarterbacks in the nation there for a while. He had a really, really bad game against Missouri. No big deal there. That's a Power 5. But Pavia has like double bonus upside if he catches the right game flow. So I'm interested what Micah thinks about Pavia in particular, and then the running game, the other running backs for New Mexico State. Somebody's got to bust for New Mexico State, right?
Yeah, I'll just say like UMass is a terrible football team. I don't expect that to change to start the season. So it is a little, like you said, concerning that spread kind of came back to where New Mexico State's only about a 7-point favorite. But yeah, Pavia, like I agree with everything you said about him. The only thing that scares me is this game environment's going to be awful. Both these teams run very slow, and neither of these teams really pass. With once again, you're not playing Pavia because he's going to throw for 300 yards. I mean, it'd be great if he did. You're playing him because he's going to run for over 100, maybe get in a couple scores. So I definitely don't mind him. Like Kyle said, I definitely prefer him on FanDuel, where he's like $300 more expensive than he is on DK, which is a big savings. But yeah, I mentioned them in my write-up. Star Thomas, Jamani Jones. Usually I'm trying to avoid or starters at the running back. But hey, I mean, UMass is bad against the run. New Mexico State has one of the highest run rates in the country. I think what I would probably do with New Mexico State is probably just a limit one. And, if Star Thomas and Jones get there, that's probably because they take the rushing touchdowns away from Pavia. Don't necessarily want to play Thomas and Jones, but I didn't see someone in the Discord say that since I told them not to play them together, that they're going to play them in ship. So that was always interesting. But this game environment is just bad. They're both very slow teams. So I'm not going to go crazy here. I'll probably limit one from New Mexico State. But I agree. I think Pavia just has a very high range of outcomes, which I think he could score 10 points. He could score 40 points. So the question is, what's he going to do? And whatever your take is on that, that'll kind of depends how you want to play him.
Yeah, I think he's very interesting this week for GPP. So one thing, as we get into it, I'd like to get your opinion on right now. Later on, we'll talk about Caleb Williams, who's like the big elephant in the room this week. Like, this is a really poor 5-game slate with a lot of weird teams, and we know what he does. So, you kind of probably should be playing double quarterbacks in just about every lineup. I understand for GPPs if you want to go do something off the board, but you should be playing double quarterbacks. So that gives you only so much exposure to quarterbacks. How much Caleb Williams? Because whatever we're going to have Caleb Williams, if we're going to be over the field, it's going to cut down on the other guys we can take. So I'll start off with Kyle. How much Caleb Williams this week? So that'll help us as we go along talking about these other quarterbacks, because he's going to take up a spot for us, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think a good way to put it is, when you look at the projected ownership, we have him at about 66% right now. I would definitely want to get over that. And at that point, you kind of come to the discussion of, are you all in or not? I think for me, the only reason I wouldn't have 100% Caleb Williams in this slate is if I were going to prioritize one of the USC running backs. I think maybe you can make a case for one of these guys getting there and Caleb Williams not. So I'll probably end up having about 85-90% of Caleb Williams here.
Micah, what's your Caleb Williams exposure going to be?
Yeah, it's going to be most likely, at least on DraftKings, 100%. I think it's more of a question on FanDuel, but I agree with Kyle. Like, okay, what do you do if you don't play Caleb Williams? I would say if you don't play Caleb Williams, you have to have Marshawn Lloyd and Austin Jones in your lineup. Maybe even have two of them. I'll tell you, if Caleb Williams busts and you somehow have Jones and Lloyd and they get all the touchdowns for USC, which is not a likely outcome, but I mean, I don't think it matters what the rest of your lineup looks like. You're probably going to be in the conversation at the end. So I'm going to lock Williams. I mentioned this in my article, DraftKings and FanDuel, even to a more extent, DraftKings doesn't really care about college football DFS. Pricing mistakes happen. Not to say that Caleb is that big of a pricing mistake, but you can fit it. There are enough out there that you can fit him in everywhere else. So I'm probably just going to lock him and see where that goes. So that's probably my stance this week, unless something drastically changes. There's just such a big gap between him and that next quarterback on the slate.
Let's talk about a couple more quarterbacks. We're going to Ohio State, San Diego State game. This game is San Diego State minus 2.5. 48.5 is our total. So a couple college games in the 40s. You never actually that'd probably be okay for the NFL. We're not really looking for 40s in the college football game, but I'll start off with Mike on this one. This one I'm having a harder time extracting some players from this because San Diego State has a relatively good defense, and I don't know, things could go awfully wrong in this game from a DFS standpoint. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the past couple of years, every time we talk about San Diego State, it's like an auto almost block. They're going to run slow. They're probably going to have a pretty good defense. And I still think, like you said, they're going to have a formidable one here. But Curtis Rourke, if Rourke doesn't get injured, he was a MAC Offensive Player of the Year last year. He has dual threat ability. He's 5,500. I mean, doesn't take much for him to put up, 20 plus points. He has a little bit of rushing upside, so I don't mind him. I think Ohio has the most consistent throughput, like where it's going to come from. I don't mind Bangura at the running back spot either. He's going to get a lot of carries, and he's one of the only guys that you really don't have a workload question on this week. Then Wiglas, he's a little bit more expensive than I'd like to play. I mean, he gets a lot of catches, but I don't know, spending that much on him, I'm kind of off a little bit. And then San Diego State and their offense, just doesn't do. I don't think I'm going to have much Maiden. I'd much rather have Rourke in this one, especially with Ohio maybe playing from behind. So I agree with you. Like, this game is kind of iffy, which does lead to lower ownership. So, like, if you, want to stack this game, hey, it's week 0. It's a 5-game slate. I don't think that's out of the question, but probably Rourke and Bangura are kind of be my main targets from this team.
Yeah, Wiglas had a little stretch there last year, man. Well, about 5-6 weeks where he was one of the he was money for us. But this is a step up in competition and healthier wide receivers around him now. So, but this is the theme I think here on this slate is running back by committee, man. We'll talk about some guys later, but it's tough to find bell cows, Kyle. So I don't know where I feel like maybe San Diego State is a place I would have wanted to go at running back. But how those carries going to pan out?
Yeah, from a projection standpoint, we're splitting it up fairly evenly. No one is really running away from a point where it's worth noting. We have Kristen leading by about 7% in terms of the rushing share, with Cam Davis being just behind him. But from this game, I guess both quarterbacks do have some appeal for me, just because, like Micah mentioned, I do think we might see some lower ownership on these guys. A lot of people are going to flock to Caleb, obviously. I think a lot of people potentially look at that first game and then also the Hank Bachmeier play, which I do like, but I think that might take up a lot of the quarterback ownership. And, you always have to be concerned with a MAC school playing a potentially better opponent here. And then obviously factoring in the torn ACL that Rourke is recovering from. It sounds like the recovery went well, but I just tend to believe that he's probably going to rely on his arm a bit more than his legs here in this one, returning from that torn ACL last year. But Jalen Maiden, we saw him have a couple of really solid games last year, mostly led by his rushing upside. So I think both these guys are pretty appealing. You mentioned the bell cow kind of upside that Bangura does have. I think he's one of the few guys who might go out there and see all of the work from a running back perspective. Obviously, Allison returning from injury, I think he'll be involved as well. But Bangura, I think he has the job here in terms of being that RB1. The price isn't great, and there's a lot of guys who we're going to talk about later on the slate that at the running back position project for better overall fantasy points and even potentially better overall roles and are just a little bit cheaper. So that week 0 pricing came out a little bit early, and some news wasn't impacted in terms of the pricing there. So you kind of get some lopsided pricing. I don't think Bangura is benefiting from that. So that's the only issue I really have with him here.
All right, next game on the board, Hawaii against Vanderbilt. And we've got a 17.5-point Vanderbilt spread. That's a lot for Vanderbilt. And 55.5 is our total. I think this is probably one of the more interesting, funner games on the slate. I think it's going to be more competitive than that 17.5-point spread. Hawaii, if you don't know, former great, like one of their legendary quarterbacks, Timmy Chang is their head coach. He's a run and shoot guy. So, I think their theory is they want to throw the ball a lot. They want to do a lot of run and shoot activity. And Vanderbilt, I think, is going to, let them do some of that. Vanderbilt doesn't scare me at all. So I think this game has a chance to be a really nice shootout. I'll start off with Kyle here. What's jumping out to you?
Yeah, like you alluded to, we have them projecting to try to be a run and gun team, like a 62% pass rate in our projection, which is obviously a big number there. Not a lot of efficiency they had last year, obviously up and down quarterback play. I don't expect that to change overnight or during the offseason. So I'm a little bit worried about the efficiency and the effectiveness of the passing game. But I agree with the job. But they're going to try. They're definitely going to try to pass. The player that stands out for me most in this game is Tylen Hines, 4,700. Obviously, Parson gone from last year, so it sounds like he's going to have the job here. There's some concerns can be brought up about his size and his potential ability to be a number one running back, but I think obviously college is a lot different than the NFL. We saw a guy like Deuce Vaughn do it last year, and I think he's definitely more suited for the college game. And obviously, we saw his explosiveness, nearly 8 yards a carry last year, over 9 yards per reception, doing it in both facets of the game. So Hines is my favorite play from the Hawaii side. And then on the Vanderbilt side, I agree with you. I do think that this spread might be a little bit of a tricky one to navigate here. I wouldn't be surprised if the game stays closer either. Obviously, we saw these two play each other in week one last year. I think it was like 46-7 or something like that. Vanderbilt, obviously not used to a lot of success, but against Hawaii, they were able to have some. Will Shepherd's the guy that stands out to me from Vanderbilt. I know what we're all going to probably talk about the running back situation here, which is an interesting one. In July or so, we were trying to project this team and break down the depth chart. And a lot of talks were that Cedric Alexander was going to be the guy out of spring ball, that he was going to be the number one, even though he's a true freshman to start the year. It sounds like we're backtracking on that now with the coach sort of talking about Patrick Smith and redshirt freshman Chase Gillespie leading the way. But I think it's going to be a committee. Last year we saw 6 guys rush for over 65 yards from this Vanderbilt team against Hawaii. So I think all 3 of these guys are in play. They should all be in your player pool. I think you can make a case for playing 2 of these 3. I would not be surprised to see Vanderbilt put up a ton of points here and have a lot of success against this Hawaii team. I think that in terms of deciding which one you like the most, it could be very difficult because I think it's going to be a committee, and I think Cedric Alexander sounds like the best talent amongst the bunch, but these other guys are definitely in play as well. So I think you should definitely be considering having at least one of these Vanderbilt guys in your lineup, and they're all fairly cheap as well.
Micah, what's your take here?
Yeah, I love AJ. I mentioned this in my article. I love AJ Swan here. Didn't do anything to inspire confidence last year. But if you remember, and he's not a dual threat guy, but remember with Mike Wright basically won the Heisman in week 1 against Hawaii last year, ran for like 160 yards, looked phenomenal. And then Wake Forest came to town in a couple weeks and just completely shut him up. But I like Swan here. I think all this Vandy team, I think, John, I think we all, picked this game kind of possibility to shoot out. I do think it is closer in that 17.5 point spread. Tylen Hines, he took one to the house against Michigan last year. He's a small guy, but he averaged 7.5 yards a carry last year. So I really like him. I think he's a great play, but he's not going to hide anywhere. He's probably going to be the highest owned running back. Will Shepherd is just a misprice. I mentioned that, guy had 116 targets last year. Swan should be much more improved. But like I said, a lot of people are going to play Shepherd. A lot of people are going to play Hines. Not a lot of people, I think, are going to just full out game stack. So for GPPs, if you think this game shoots out, I don't mind playing, Hines, Swan, Shepherd, even throwing a Jaden McGowan, who you see that ownership, and I tagged him. I'm not saying to fade Shepherd and play him, but if you do stack like Swan, Shepherd, and McGowan, you're going to have a different lineup for GPPs. And on a slate like this where Caleb's going to be ridiculously owned, you got to find a couple ways to set yourself apart. And then Patrick Smith, man, I don't know if y'all have looked into him, but he averaged 2.7 yards per attempt last year. Even though it's Hawaii, it's tough to get behind him. I'd probably prefer Chase Gillespie just because he's in between both of them. But I agree with you about Cedric. I think, he's an intriguing play. He's been getting talked a lot up. But Will Shepherd's too cheap. Hines is definitely too cheap. I think Swan's my favorite play from this game. I think this game's definitely stackable, and I don't think it will be that chalky if you get yourself a couple low-owned pieces outside of Hines and Shepherd. I kind of find playing them and just getting a little bit different elsewhere.
Yeah, the Patrick Smith yards per carry stood out to me, man. He's at the top. He's at the top of the depth chart. That's good, but that doesn't mean anything. They're still going to split carries, and I tend to avoid guys who are going to split carries and they're less than 3 yards a carry is what he get. It doesn't bode well. You got some more explosive guys in there, so man, it's Hawaii. He could have a big game. GPPs, I'll have something. No, it certainly won't be. What have we got him projected at? Almost 15%. I'll be under the field on that. But I'm not a huge fan of that. But yeah, I like these passing games here. I think it's going to be good. But next game on the board, it's a big one. Actually, a bigger school here, USC San Jose State. Line right now is 30.5. 66.5 is our total. USC, big expectations, Micah, and we've got some. They've got some star players on offense here, and they should do what they want against San Jose State. It's just a matter of how do they divvy it out, man? When is enough going to be enough for them, and they start, pulling the carries and the targets for certain guys. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is shocker, like the decision of the slate. Are you going to play Caleb? Is USC going to blow out San Jose State and play like 15 different guys at the skill positions? Is this game going to be a little closer than the 30-point spread? So USC starters play a whole bunch of the game. The USC depth chart did not help that out either. There are a bunch of OR designations there. Dorian Singer is the big fish that comes in from Arizona. Is he going to be the number one? That's a great question. I mean, if you just want to almost just look at the wide receivers on USC, just because, they spread everything out so much that like you see that ownership gap between Singer and like Mario Williams, Brendan Rice, Washington, and even some of the cheaper guys. What you really have to decide is like, is Singer that much of a better play at kind of a similar price point to all those guys to where he should be twice or three times owned as those guys? I love Mario Williams here. He's played with Caleb ever since he's been at Oklahoma. He was a little bit banged up last year. His price is right under Singer. So I think he comes in a little bit ahead of that because he is actually designated as a starter. But I don't think that plays into it too much. I like Mario Williams. And like I said, if you're going to play Caleb Williams and Singer, I just make sure you're different somewhere else, because it ain't going to, like, if Williams and Singer connect on an 80-yard bomb first play, you're going to move up the leaderboard, but you're going to move up the leaderboard with everybody else, right? But, man, I really love Cordero here. Like, people are sleeping on him in terms of what kind of year he had last year. Ran for 500 yards, had a 20-4 touchdown to interception ratio. If you think USC and San Jose State keep this even semi-competitive, with his legs and his upsides, I think Chop, you had him getting there in garbage time in the expert survey. I agree. Like him, I think he's definitely a little bit lower owned just because he's in that weird range. I love Cordero this week. Lockhart's probably the big question, right? Is he going to go? We have him projected. We'll obviously keep y'all updated in the Discord what's going on there. But if Lockhart does not play, and we've got that injury designation now in HQ that you can look at, he's a big question in the slate too, because he opens up all the value in the world because his backup's $3K. So this game's intriguing. I like both quarterbacks. I'll be stacking this either way that I can. And the USC running backs, same thing. They're both expensive. There's a timeshare. So a lot to decide here and a lot of ways to play USC, which, shocker, when they're scheduled to score 50 points, that you're definitely going to want some.
Yeah, you mentioned the new injury tag. It's, a little behind the scenes, a bit of a, a lot of little spirited debate in the Slack channel. I think it's an interesting thing here. You click on that. What this is going to be every week, guys, is anybody who has a halfway decent projection that could factor the slate. If there's something going on, they're not necessarily, there's questionable, doubtful. We don't have NFL type of injury designations. We'll highlight them here, and then you can make your decision for, we talk about Lockhart. The guy is in a cast for the better part of the last few weeks. Don, we don't know how many times have you played college football and like
you don't warm
know.
up.
They kick off. You have no idea because there's really no beat writers at certain stadiums, or they're not tweeting it out. They kick off, and all of a sudden you get the news after the first drive. Oh, well, so-and-so's in street clothes over there. Like Lockhart could play and get a 100-yard bonus. He's the number one if he plays. The guy could have a cast on his hand after kickoff. So you make your own decision. We have no idea, but that's what the injury designation is for. And so I'll go to Kyle now. A lot to talk about in this game, man. Hit on Lockhart, some of those San Jose State wide receivers in garbage time, and anybody else you like.
Yeah, I mean, I think you guys made a great point about the injury designation. Obviously, it's nothing like the NFL. We don't have constant, sources and reporters reporting on key injuries and stuff like that. And, Lockhart is a big injury. And to be honest, from a projection standpoint, we actually bumped his projection down quite a bit because we don't know, right? So he could be dealing with, I believe they said it's a cast on his hand. So it could be, a broken hand, broken finger. We don't really know. So this is a guy who we have projected for about a 21% target share right now. But truthfully, he has upside for more. He's stepping into a really good role. Obviously, Elijah Cooks departed this team to the NFL. He averaged, 65 yards per game nearly, and 10 touchdowns last year, 98 targets on the season for Elijah Cooks. So plenty of opportunities opened up for Lockhart, who was good in his own right last year. Didn't find the end zone, but he still averaged 16.5 yards per reception, 70 targets on the year. So this is a guy who definitely has a potential to fit in here. And he would also fit pretty well with USC stacks. And to go along with it, with the kind of the question marks around it, he might end up being fairly low owned as well. So he's a guy that I do have a lot of interest in here, especially if we can get a strong report on his health. In terms of the USC guys, I totally agree. I see the upside for Singer and why you'd want to play him. All reports do kind of lead to a lot of hype being posed around Singer, and obviously a lot of transfers have come to USC, been the number one there. But to Micah's point, it's always been a fairly spread out passing attack here. If you wanted to pair Singer with Caleb, obviously there's no problem there. He does project the best for us, but there's lots to go around here. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of production. There's going to be a lot of potential scoring opportunities. I think my favorite right now is probably going to be Brendan Rice at 6,200. Obviously, from a projection standpoint, all these guys project fairly similarly, with Singer getting kind of a tier of his own, and then Williams, Rice, and Washington kind of being in the tier below these guys. But I mean, really, you can make a case for 2 or 3 other guys as well. Deuce Robinson is a 5-star true freshman who's like a tight end wide receiver hybrid who should be able to have a pretty substantial role for a freshman coming into a team here on the outside. He has a lot of talent. Raleek Brown is a running back converted to wide receiver who they've been using kind of all over the field. So at 4,300, he also makes sense. And again, this is just a team that's projected to score a lot of points. We haven't projected for almost 7 touchdowns. So when you look at that, there's going to be plenty of wealth to go around here. So if you're playing 150 lineups, don't be afraid to kind of spread your exposure here, especially if you're locking in Caleb Williams, because a lot of those plays are going to correlate as well.
Yeah, my opinion on it would be that I think San Jose State's better offensively than what they're being given credit for. So I think they can kind of keep it. They're not going to keep it close, but I think they can score some points. I think they're a good fantasy team. And USC, I don't think they're going to be in any rush starting the third quarter to score with that first team offense. Who knows if those guys are even going to be out there, but they could put up enough in the first. They could outscore every other team on the slate just in the first half with their first team offense. So it's one of those things you could be sitting back watching this thing going, wow, that's 5 drives and 5 touchdowns for Caleb Williams. And if you ain't got him and name any wide receiver he's throwing to, you're buried. So I think it's a fun game. I think San Jose State's they've got a chance here because of what Micah said. Shavon Cordero, man, I like him. So see how it plays out. Last game on the slate. This one checks off quite a few boxes for us. It's a decent total at 57.5, a much tighter spread than the USC. This is only a 12.5 point spread. We've also got some injuries in this game that are going to lead to, I want to say lock and load running backs, but these injuries are going to help us out making lineups here. They're going to make choices easier for us. So start off with Kyle on this one. What do you see in this game?
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the injuries for Louisiana Tech here. Marquise Crosby, sounds like he's going to miss this game and maybe even a couple other ones to start the year. And then Miami, Ohio transfer Tyree Shelton, who was expected to be the backup. He's also dealing with an injury, and it sounds like from reports that he's closer to doubtful rather than questionable. So it sounds like potential third stringer Jarvis Thornton's going to step into a pretty massive role here. And again, this is one of those situations where, like Micah mentioned, DraftKings doesn't really put in a ton of effort into pricing anyway, so he probably would just be, cheap regardless. But with the pricing coming out early, you get a pretty nice price tag on this guy, 5,400. He's the best projected value play amongst non-quarterbacks on the entire slate. So he makes a lot of sense as a guy to be in the majority of your lineups, and obviously a cash game type play. But there are a couple of other, running back options behind him that I guess could step in for some carries. I'm not sure if these are guys that you're, looking to get a ton of in terms of your lineups, but a guy like Keith Willis Jr., he's 3K flat. There's been a lot of hype around him. And then Jacob Fields as well. Personally, I'm not going overboard on these running backs, but just want to throw those names out there in case anyone's looking for some really deep flyers here. But it does appear that Thornton's going to be the guy by all means. And then in terms of the pass catchers here, I really like the pass catching options that we have available for us. Louisiana Tech, obviously Smoke Harris returning. He was solid all of last year. And then with Cyrus Allen stepping into a bigger role here, I'm pretty excited about this team. And obviously, this is a run and gun, pass heavy offense. They've been there. They've been that way for the past couple of years now. And with Hank Bachmeier now quarterbacking this team, I'm really excited about them potentially becoming even more efficient and maybe potentially even more pass heavy, especially with the running backs being banged up to start the year. Trey Harris obviously gone now, so I think that's going to leave room for Cyrus Allen to step in. He averaged almost 22 yards per reception last year. That's obviously a number that's probably not going to be attainable every single game and every single season, but that still goes to speak on his upside there. Obviously, Smoke Harris had a good season. And then True Edwards is also, I believe he's also dealing with a little bit of an injury. So we want to check in on that, but it doesn't sound to be all that serious. And he's 3K and he's currently third on the depth chart here. So this is probably my second favorite team to stack outside of USC. I don't think they'll really go under any radars or anything like that, but you could potentially look to maybe avoid the chalk on the slate Thornton if you want to be really contrarian and just, really pile up on this passing attack here. I don't think you're going to get a ton of ownership breaks on the receivers either, but I do think they could potentially see a little bit of a unique build here by just stacking Bachmeier with two pass catchers here for La Tech.
All right, Micah, this may be our one and only chance this whole year to talk about Florida International, Louisiana Tech. Who knows? Yeah, who knows how it plays out? So what'd you see in your research?
Yeah, if you haven't played college football DFS and this is your first year, this is like your welcome to college football DFS. FIU, I don't think they've put out a depth chart, have they? I think FIU is the one team that has no depth chart. And Louisiana Tech has Travis Thornton listed as number 1, and Tyree Shelton is questionable, but he's listed right behind him on the depth chart. So obviously it doesn't make Thornton a bad play if Shelton plays, but if Shelton plays, you're just in a timeshare like you are with every other matchup on the slate. So decide what you think is best there. But yeah, as it sits right now, we expect that Shelton doesn't play. Thornton's going to get a ton of carries. But once again, it's an air raid. Cyrus Allen, Kyle mentioned his numbers last year are ridiculous. Like Smoke Harris is your cash game play. Not to say you can't play him with Allen, but Allen is like, average 22 yards a catch. He caught 43 less balls than Smoke Harris last year and had 118 less receiving yards. That's kind of crazy. And then, yeah, same thing with True Edwards, mid-price. And FIU, I mean, they're just, I think Grayson James is going to start. Shamari Lawrence is probably going to start. And then Chris Mitchell, those three guys kind of highlighted. But then I think, one of those guys could definitely break the slate outside of them. But it's just, a little bit of an unknown. So this is the last game. I do agree. Closer spread, kind of bigger total. It's not San Jose State, USC. But, yeah, Hank Bachmeier, man, he scares – this whole Louisiana Tech team on the quarterback, running back scared me a little bit just because we all know Hank Bachmeier from Boise State. And just like Boise State was never like good for DFS. Just when you'd play Bachmeier, Helani would go off. When you play Helani, Bachmeier would go off. So he always has that back of my mind. But he's in an air raid system, quarterback in an air raid system. You would think, hey, let me play him, especially at 5,800. So he will be popular. I think a lot of cash games or single entries, your two quarterbacks will be Hank Bachmeier and Caleb Williams. So once again, just take that into account. If you're trying to take down a GPP, probably want to get a little bit different there if you're going to play both those guys at quarterback. So should be an intriguing game. Good end to the week 0 slate on Saturday night.
Yeah, that one's going to be fun. So we got we got a new look in the expert rankings. I don't know, if you were here last year and you bought the tools, and I did not like it, man. I'm not gonna lie, I did not like the way it looked. We cleaned it up this year. Take a look at this, man. A little freebie this weekend. Look at this. Well, I like the way that you can sort through the consensus rankings now, and there's not all that jumbled mess down there. We'll get it even cleaner as the weeks go on. But yeah, I like that. We got Bachmeier number 2. Bachmeier had some really good weeks with Boise State at times in his career. And then he just fell off a cliff and was never to be heard from again. But we got him at number 2, Cordero number 3. So it's some interesting plays there. One other game we're going to hit on. I don't think we got the projections up yet. Navy, Notre Dame. This is a game that is featured in FanDuel, and they do have a showdown for it on DraftKings. So I go with Micah real quick. Do you have any thoughts on Navy and Notre Dame here?
Yeah, Navy, I guess, is going to try and like a more of a spread option offense now. Still have some option principles, but they got Georgia Southern's offensive coordinator, so they'll look a little bit different. Is that going to matter against Notre Dame across the pond? I don't know. Sam Hartman is at Notre Dame now. Audric Estime is a running back who I love. Like I'm going to lose a lot of money on Estime tomorrow if it is a running back by committee there. But Notre Dame, I think they should have a pretty solid offense. So that spread is right around 3 touchdowns. I like Hartman. I like Estime. Jaden Thomas is also waiting in the wings. So I'm actually excited to watch Notre Dame, mainly because they could do well. Or like I was loving it last year. Who they lose to start the season? Like Marshall at home. Like if Navy were to win this game, I'd be all for it. I don't think it's going to happen, but it would be very interesting if Marcus Freeman kind of got back last year, won more of the games down the stretch, but started out horrible. It would be an interesting college football storyline if week 0, the first game, Notre Dame loses to Navy in Dublin. So it should be an entertaining one, but we're all going to say that just because it's at least a college football game in the afternoon on a Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, Notre Dame, it would be funny to see Notre Dame lose, but I'm not going to lie. If you guys look at scores and odds, I don't think we're doing a betting show this week, so I've put up my bet as Notre Dame on scores and odds. Man, I like when they acquired Sam Hartman via the transfer portal. That's a big time move for them. Now all those quarterbacks, that's what they were missing these last several years, is that reliable quarterback. Man, who was it that was they had that quarterback a few years ago, pretty good in college. He's one of the worst pro quarterbacks I've ever seen.
Deshaun Kaiser.
No, he was bad too. No, the one guy last year or the year before that was on Monday Night Football, the Saints.
Ian Book.
Ian Book, boy, he's bad. So they used to love Ian Book, and he's that bad. Just imagine how they're gonna feel about Hartman. They're gonna love him because he is a great college quarterback. I don't know what his pro thing is gonna be, but he's a great college quarterback. So you hit on it. Navy's trying to change systems. This probably isn't a good time to do it. Last year on defense, when you looked at their splits, run versus pass on defense, they were pretty solid against the run, terrible against the pass, but Notre Dame's probably going to run anyway. But I'd be interested to see how much they get Hartman in the flow there and how loose they get him and all that good stuff. Kyle, do you have any takes on this game?
I think Micah kind of nailed it. I think there's a potential for a running back by committee just based on some quotes from the running back coach and from Marcus Freeman. But I think this is a good week to target Estime. A lot of the guys that are potentially going to have a role are either returning from a pretty serious injury, like Jadarian Price returning from that Achilles injury, or they're young guys, or they're transfers. Devin Ford transferred in, Jeremiah Love, young guys. So I think that this could be a chance to maybe see Estime kind of really run as the number one while these guys kind of ramp up into speed or get used to the offense here. I think the pass catching options are going to be pretty interesting to see where the ball goes. Obviously, we have Michael Mayer just kind of dominating all of the targets last season. With him being gone, probably going to see it be more spread out, but I think they'll be more efficient. Like you mentioned there with Sam Hartman, I think that's a really good add for them. And I would not be surprised to see them become, kind of more of a prolific passing offense, which will be really interesting to see. I think those two guys, Hartman and Estime, from a projection standpoint, those are the two clear-cut best plays from a showdown perspective. And then you have guys like Jaden Thomas. I think Mitchell Evans is a guy who's fairly interesting in the showdown slate. Obviously, he's going to be taking whatever he can of the Mayer role. Obviously, he's not going to be able to, compete for 30% of the targets like Mayer did last year. But if he finds the end zone, once, maybe even twice if you're lucky, I think he's a decent showdown play, as people probably won't go overboard on a tight end in college football.
Yeah, that's just a little showdown to get you started at about 1:30 on Saturday, and it's part of the FanDuel game, so we'll touch on it. But guys, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. We went about 40 minutes on this little 5-gamer. We'll be back, like I said, every week. You'll have this thing by Thursday night, and you'll be able to dig into it on Friday whenever you want to. So we're going to have some fun with it. It's week 0. College football is back next week. Oh, buddy, now we really start to talk, man. Now we're getting into some big-time games, so it's going to be fun. But until next week, that was Micah, that was Kyle, I was your host, Chop. We'll be back next Thursday. For now, we're out of here.